Also ready now?
Yep.
Oh, we're live.
Yes, we're live.
Hello, everyone. What's going on? So we wanted to come to you today and start off with a new potential series. Today I'll start with the video. It's a roundtable, so you may have seen this before with other studios or other companies, but basically it's just a very organic conversation. What we'll be talking about today is modding. All right, so all of us up here have modded at some point. It's doing different things. You know, some of us have done maps, some of us have done scripting, some of us have done nothing. No, I'm kidding. So the purpose today is to talk about that process, talk about what it's like being a modder, talking about what it's like now being employed by the company, some of the things that we went through during that process. You know, we all have some of us have mods that have made it to official, so that process in itself is a very enlightening one. So we want to come together, talk about it, you know, just randomly chat about some of those experiences, have some fun. So we'll start off with a very simple question. How much experience do we have in ARC? So for me, I can say I have 1,000 legit hours. So I have more hours than that, but some of those hours are just like, you know, testing mods or going in and checking my stuff. I will say that those 1,000 hours were before breeding was even introduced or before you could have babies in ARC. Yeah. So my 1,000 hours were very early on in ARC, and a lot has changed since then. So I'm definitely out of the loop as some of the in-game tech stuff and some of the breeding stuff. I've never breeded. I've never really raised a dino baby before. So I'm definitely out of the loop on that aspect of the game. What about you, Zane? How many hours? You probably have too many hours.
Yeah, well, before I started working here, it was probably like 300 to 500. And since it's like 4,000 between my work and personal account. But I do a lot of testing, too, because I was in QA. So there was a lot of work hours logged on that. But yeah, it's quite a bit.
Were most of your experiences like PvE, PvP?
I actually started out PvE. I joined in on the early onset rush of the game, saw all the scary news that PvP is this crazy thing, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. And I did it. I joined a private server, started off, and then found the mod kit or the dev kit and was like, oh, I could do this. I could make the game do this instead. I like this better. I'll do that. And then I got hooked.
Nice.
I started building out and just repurposing the entire game after that.
Jackson, did you even play ARC? I don't even know if you played, dude.
Dude, actually, so I started in PvP, and I had about 1,000 hours, roughly. But then I started modding, and then all my time was spent in the editor. So.
It's going to be a common trend you see.
Yeah.
It's going to be common with all of us.
I was back when it took what did it take? We did 4 shifts to tame a T-Rex back then.
Yeah. I was
so
playing
crazy.
when it wasn't even kibble tames. Like the kibble system wasn't out there. It was just prime
meat.
Oh
yeah, no, there was no kibble.
Prime meat
you
and
just
meat,
sat there and
you
waited.
sat there and you waited. And man, I definitely remember taming a Spino, and it wasn't even prime meat. It was raw meat, so it took 8 hours. It was something crazy.
Yeah,
it was a high
that was
level.
before we had the 2X global.
Mm-hmm. Way before that.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So why not know?
Yeah, that is true. So some people that are new to ARC, the rates are double what they used to be. So just imagine the things you're doing now and doing, you know, stuff like raising babies or like taming things. Like imagine that being double the time. It was definitely a time sink, and you definitely got invested. At least I did. What about you, Josh?
I was pretty invested in the beginning. I think I was just strictly playing the game for maybe about 800 or so hours. I think I got into modding right around the time that we introduced the Mosasaur.
Okay.
And from then on, it was just all of my time. I'd get home from work at night. I'd go right into the dev kit, playing with that, go to sleep, go back to work, and just repeat that every day. Just thousands and thousands of hours in the dev kit before I ever got hired here.
Wow, we're sounding like we don't have lives here.
I
Dave, what about you, man?
I think I'm on a little bit lower end. I think I only started for the first month, 500-600 hours.
Okay. That's still a good amount of hours. It's amazing to me how we talk about these hours in relation to Ark, where we say it's only 500 hours, only
Really, it's
600.
not that much.
When you put that into a different game, it's like 500 to 600 hours in a game. It's
Well, you say like 500.
Crazy.
500 is a lot, and people are like, I got 4,000.
yeah, exactly.
I
It's,
was born in Ark.
Some people, I swear they are.
Yeah. And then that was all an official PvP. And then I wanted something different, so we were looking for maps, and there was not really any out at that time because it was very early. And then basically just went right into making our first map, which was Valhalla. So
everybody, like, if you're an OG Ark player, I think you've probably heard of Valhalla. It was very infamous in the Ark community. I think at the time when it came out, I mean, I'm going to be modest in saying that these guys were pioneering something that other people weren't doing at that time. Of course, it's definitely expanded now. We have a lot more people that are getting out there and making really cool stuff. But at that time, it wasn't a lot of things out there like Valhalla. And this map, just the size of it, it was really popular in the role play communities. It just really took on this crazy trend. And meanwhile, I'm a modder myself. I didn't do level design or anything like that, but I just remember getting jealous. Like, man, this mod isn't that good. Can't be.
I look back now and I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Of course, everyone learns,
right,
no matter what they're doing.
Right.
Like, you look back on your old work and you're like, what was I doing? What were we thinking?
Yeah. Yep.
Not to mention too, because before when I was looking at Valhalla, I was like, that was the competition for me. That was like, oh man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
it was.
Here's what we got to try to do.
It definitely ruffles some feathers in the community, especially the modding community. If you are a part of the modding community or not, I'll just let you know it's a competitive scene. It's a lot of. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of sharing that's going on, and there's a lot of knowledge share that happens, but inside the scene, it's pretty competitive. It's healthy competitive, I would say. I don't want to say it like it's nasty. And I go back to saying, Valhalla, when I saw that, I was like, oh, crap. Like, maybe I need to step it up. These guys are, like, on another level out here. But I ended up beating them anyway. But
That's actually my favorite part. I was like, when we were looking at the contest, I was like, oh, well, at least it was you.
That segues into a good point. So, for a lot of what's happening now at Wildcard and a lot of why we are all here is a large, at least for myself, and I would argue that, maybe Dave and Jackson a little bit, the mod contest was a huge exposure point. Especially the first one. I think we did it in 2000, I can't even remember what it was, 2000.
Yeah, it's
a while ago.
A long time
It
ago.
was
It feels like
about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. It was quite some time ago. It was probably like 8 months after the game went into early access. It was pretty early on. So the mod contest, the first mod contest, it was an international mod contest. It was labeled that way. There were certain countries that couldn't permit. It was like my first time experiencing, actually this was my first time entering any type of contest at this level.
Was it the Alienware one?
Yeah, it was the Alienware one. Yes, it was the Alienware one. So, it was definitely a new process for me. I remember, so when they released the dev kit, let's back up a second. When they released the dev kit, did you guys immediately jump in?
Not me.
No.
Yes, yeah, no, it's pretty much right in the beginning.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
I did not. I didn't jump in immediately either. Funny thing is, I always wanted to make a game. So before I jumped into the dev kit, I was actually making the survival game and not an Unreal. And then the dev kit opened up, and as I was making the game, I thought to myself, man, I am in way over my head. I don't know what I'm doing. And I have a background. I'm a computer science degree. I've done programming. I've never done video game programming or done anything with video games, but I remember thinking at that point, the dev kit would be a good way to learn, bridge that gap. The perfect way of saying it. There's already living examples in there of things that are set up. There's things that are live in games where you can see it in games and then you can break it apart and look at what's going on. So for me, it was pretty critical in my learning process, having a tool like the development kit, having something out there that has examples in it that I can, break apart, put together, figure out what's going on. Because if you guys don't know, modding is pretty tough when you don't have source. When basically what source is the source code behind everything that we do. So a lot of time modders are left guessing what certain functionality does in the dev kit. So, it's a very experimental process when you are a modder because a lot of times you're just going in the wind. I mean, I'm sure you guys have had times where you're just plugging and playing and trying to
Literally,
see.
yeah, one of the things I always used to say was just like people always ask from the community, like, how'd you get started? Like, literally I was clicking on stuff, like trying to reverse engineer things, figure out how to break it and then fix it and then go from there and then just build it from there. And
had you guys had any level design experience in Unreal prior to starting Valhalla and starting some of that stuff? I know you were working on a different map, Jackson. I can't remember the name. I'm sorry, but I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
I got you.
There we go.
Umasora,
I do remember.
claimed
Yes.
a fan. Not
that map.
I know you loved it. Yeah.
It was a good map. No,
Was that your map?
That was my map, yeah.
That was one of my favorite maps.
nice.
Well, I appreciate it. No, I definitely worked in Unreal beforehand doing level design.
Anything to the level of what you did in Umasora?
No, I mostly did because before I was working in like Killing Floor and back when Killing Floor was actually a mod before I got bought by Tripwire, and also working in Red Orchestra 2.
Okay.
So working in there, but a lot more smaller. But the whole reason I wanted to do Umasora was like challenge myself to essentially build a map greater on a larger scale than I ever had. And I didn't expect it to be as much work.
Yeah. What about you, Dave? What was probably the most underappreciated thing that you had to go through in terms of level design? Meaning it may seem easy, but it's underappreciated as far as some of the work that goes into it.
I would almost say, I mean, cop-out answer, but almost all of level design is like that because you look at something and you're like, oh, this environment's cool. But someone had to go and place all that stuff, and
Very true.
artists had to go and make sure all the colors looked right, background, like tech art, like all the materials and textures were functioning properly. There's so many layers of just the environment. It's a deep rabbit hole.
It is.
Sounds are set up.
Yeah. And to that point, I mean, I thought, and just being completely honest, when I started modding, I was like, I'm gonna do a map because it's easier.
Yeah. Number one. That's
so easy to do. Like these guys are just putting down trees and rocks. I can do that. I stopped very quickly when I realized what was going on.
Each, I guess, discipline has its tough points. For
Right,
sure.
right. And modding is tough too. And to your point, there's going to be things that are challenging with any discipline. But, and I think it really just depends on, what you have a passion for. I mean, when I started getting into level design and I wanted to do that, to be honest, it was only because I thought it was easier. And, the contest, I knew the contest was out there. I'm like, this is going to be easier to do. And once I got into it, you're going to have trouble powering through some of these issues you have if you don't have a passion for the project you're working on.
Oh, 100%.
Because you're going to hit stops where you're just like, I don't know what to do, man. And it's so easy to give up on that project at that point if you don't have a passion for it. It's easy to say, I'll just go to the next thing. You know what? Kind of like you guys did with Valhalla. I'm joking. it's very easy to give up on something when you don't have a passion for it. So it's very, I think when you start, if you are getting into modding, it's important to be passionate about what you're working on. I mean, I understand that there's, now in this day and age, you can make money from modding. There's many different ways, not just with the way that we're doing, with other companies are doing different things to try to incentivize modders as well. So, as easy as it may be to see the money involved, I can guarantee you once you get into the knee deep of development, if you don't have a passion for it, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle, especially as a modder without access to source, and you're running into issues. You don't really have a lot of resources other than the people that are going through the same problems you are. You have to have some persistence to get through it, and I've had many challenges like that with Primitive Plus. I still do.
So did you think a total conversion would be easier? Or?
No, to be honest, it was completely strategic. I knew nobody was going to do a total conversion, and I knew back then the contests, and even now, but back then the contests were categorized a little bit. It's a little bit more. You know, you had total conversions, you had mods, you had maps. These were all different categories.
Yeah.
And I knew like nobody's going to try a total conversion. Like that's an easy win for me. Like it's a layup. And that's the reason why I did total conversion, I'll be honest.
But you did a good job with it.
You did execute it.
Yeah, I mean,
Prim Plus is no layup.
No,
Mod.
My goal was to like completely change everything that I could. You know, and I didn't get as far as I wanted to, but you know, you have very lofty dreams when you start modding. You know, if I would ask people, you know, from day one to the end, did you accomplish everything you set out to do from day one? Wholeheartedly, it's probably going to say no. You know, you just have really lofty dreams. You start off with all these grandiose ideas, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and you know, you get knee deep in it, and you may either find out one, some of those things are not possible, like they're just technically not possible in the engine, you know, and the things that we're doing, or two, it's just not worth it. Like it's just not worth 6 months for this feature, or 8 months for this feature. You know, when you could be working on other stuff or different things. And this is where I want to kind of go over to Josh, because Josh worked on an interesting mod that is arguably took a lot of research, a lot of R&D, a lot of understanding of the development kit. Josh, what did you work on?
So if you're not familiar, the mod that I was sponsored for was called ArcFrame. And basically, if you're familiar with like Skyrim or Minecraft and the Forge and script extender systems, this was kind of something in that vein. It was aimed to extend the dev kit and provide some functionality for mods to be able to tie into and communicate with each other. But it was a massive headache on many levels, in that I had to basically rebuild the entire game to insert code into some of the base classes. It was a nightmare. Unfortunately, that project was too late in the lifespan of the modding community and never took off, but it still serves as a good educational resource for modders. I still get asked sometimes how to do certain things, and I'm just like, hey, I've got some source over here that I can take a look at this. Here's some good examples. So it wasn't a complete waste, but it was definitely I think I spent 2 straight months at one point just copying and reparenting and renaming files.
Yeah.
And just that.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
But
That was the other reason you went to total conversion. Because you don't have to do that.
yeah.
That's pretty good.
Now, for me, support tools were something that I was better with. I wasn't so much on I'm going to create, you know, these game features and systems.
That's a good
that
point.
wasn't something that I had a whole lot of experience with, but I had experience with creating support tools, and I had sort of this vision of how modding could be for the Arc Dev Kit, and I tried to implement that as best as I could. Yeah, it fell flat on its face, but we learned some stuff.
Yeah, and that was my point, is saying that, you know, sometimes you fail like Josh, and sometimes you win the contest like me. You know, you have to be able to deal with all that stuff. No, I'm kidding.
Keep in mind, I got paid to fail.
Yeah, he did. So this is a great story. I've had many failures in modding. Don't get me wrong. People will go down my Twitter and they will show you many times where I failed on something, or I said I was going to do something and I just couldn't get it done. It's just part of development. I don't want to skip over Zane, because Zane was a modder too. You know, he did do mods. Zane, tell them about your experience in modding and what your ideal goal was when you started modding. Why did you mod? Like, what made you want to do your mod?
Supply drops. Those crop plots, man. Those crop plots and water jars.
That's what made you
I was like, I'm not standing for this anymore. I saw there was a dev kit, and I was like, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to make this better.
Was there one crop plot that was like the final straw?
That's what I like too.
It might have been. I don't remember like the exact moment, but I know that was my first goal. Like, I just started out with, I'm going to fix this, and this is going to be great. It's going to make the game whole new game. I just gave it much more, you know, loot and more variety, and the higher drops, you know, gave higher loot.
Yeah.
More commonly, not just crop plots all the time. But that just it got its hooks in me. I saw how much I could change, and just the way Unreal works. Like there's so much that if you understand what someone was trying to communicate, because all of our variable names are named with a specific purpose in mind. Like we try name everything to where its name describes what it's going to do. And I was able to pick up on what everything was, and it was really easy for me to make a small tweak here, a small tweak there, and get the result that I expected.
Yeah.
And from there, I was just like, oh my gosh, I could redesign this game entirely. And I did all new dinos. I added a bunch of colors because everyone was doing color mods at that time. So I made sure I had my colors in my mod. But I did loot drops, dinos. I made a couple items, made a couple machine tier stuff like the industrial cooking pot before we had one in game. Things that people were asking for that I knew how to do. It was just using functionality we already had, just making it faster or something. I was a very, very low skill modder, I would call it. But the fact that our dev kit is the way it is, it made it to where even with no experience modding at all, no experience programming, any of that, I was still able to just pick it up, and that's really what hooked me. It's just there was so much to learn, and I never stopped.
Yeah.
And I didn't even have a plan for what to do other than I want to fix loot drops, and then I was like, oh my gosh, there's a world
now I can
of
do
work
all
that
this
I can
stuff.
do, and I just started running down that path.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about, the representation that's up here. We all did different types of mods. They did maps. Josh did something that's more of a tool than your typical content mod. I did more of a total conversion where I'm just trying to change the face of everything. And Zane said, you know what? I don't like the way all this stuff is balanced. I want to make some changes here. I want to add some different dinos. I want to color some dinos. There's a lot of different ways that you can approach modding, and there's a lot of different ways to approach it. And all of us have approached it a different way and are now sitting here employed by a video game company. So let's talk about that transition. It's been eye-opening for me personally. I can speak from personal. It's been eye-opening. I had an idea of what I thought game development was before I came into this role. Basically I had three different ideas. I had one idea before I even started doing game development. I had a different idea once I started modding, and then a totally different one once I got employed. So I've had three different perspectives of how I thought game development went, and it's definitely eye-opening. So let's talk about let's start easy. How did you guys get contacted about being hired? How did you know you were going to be hired? I'll start with me. It's a weird story because Jat will tell you, I actually, before the contest even wrapped up, I emailed Jat. This is probably a month after I stopped playing the game, and I was like, listen, I think you guys have an opportunity to hire this type of guy. And what I was basically poaching for is I was poaching for a mod community manager. I was saying, hey, you guys need somebody that's going to be in between your modding people and the developers. And he never responded to me. I never got a response from that. So months later, I participate in the contest, the first contest, I win it. And I was just on a high from winning, to be honest. The ego in me felt like I should have won, but I was still surprised that I won. It's a very weird position to be in. And it went quiet for about a week after that. And then a week following that, Jack contacted me, and he was like, hey, ironically, now this role was their idea. We have a mod community role. We think you should apply for it. Dude, let me show you my email I sent 8 months ago where I said this. Welcome to the club. And that's pretty much how our conversation started, and went on from there, and we talked. So Zane, I don't know if I know how yours went about. These other guys I know because I was here for it. But
it was unique. It started off with the Steam message from Jat of, hey, how's it going? I have someone that wants to talk to you. Do you have a moment? And I was like, yeah. I didn't even know who he was at first, actually. But then he started explaining that they were looking for someone to help with a new version or mode that they were building up. And then I got in touch with our lead programmer, Jeremy, and had a conversation with one of the heads of the studio same day. And I was just like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Like, mind blown. But I was brought on to help just set up SOTF, the original mod. I was just the guy who was going around changing a bunch of numbers. But it was because my mod was literally just a rebalance mod for the most part. And I knew all the files, all the things, where everything was, where dinos are at, how to change dinos, how to change values, how to get the effects we're looking for. I had already proven that through my mod. They needed someone that could do it quick. And I think at the time, I was probably one of the bigger mods as far as like overall content, just because I got so hooked, and I think I was working in the dev kit a good like 12 hours more a day. But I had just wildcard amounts of content and release already. So they're like, you're perfect.
Yeah, we want you.
Yeah. And then I got brought in the team, and we just immediately started building SOTF pretty much, and was on that train. That was a blast. But ever since, it's just been started off really as QA and, helping assist people with wherever they need things input that is just a time thing, helping people save time.
Yep.
And then from there, picking up everything that I can along the way. How do I get better at this? How do I learn more about this? To where I'm at now.
Yeah, Dave and Jackson, what's up? What? I definitely remember. I remember that because I was internal at this point, so I already had an inkling that there was an itch for Dave and Jackson and Ragnarok. It was definitely circulating around the office. People were talking about it. At the time, I was the mod community manager, so they were asking me about who is this Dave and Jackson guy, and I was like, don't worry, those are the guys that lost to me. It doesn't really matter. I'm joking. So I definitely heard some itching internally about. So I kind of knew things were going down, but from your angle, how did everything go down, or how did everything start?
Yeah. Well, actually, that's funny to hear, because it makes a lot more sense now that there was already kind of talk going around. Because from our perspective, like, we were in the mod program at the time.
That's right, yeah.
But very early, like I think it just started.
At its infancy, yeah.
Yeah, and we knew that you guys are going down to GDC, and so we just basically I bought tickets to fly down. Jackson was already kind of down there, just a little bit south, because it was in San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
And you were in LA.
Yeah.
I was Portland, and so Jackson drove up. I flew down, and then we basically just showed up, and we were like,
I do remember that.
We were like, "Hey, Jack, how's it going?" And he's like, "Oh, you guys are Ragnarok." It's like, "Hold on," and he's like, "Hey, come back in like a few hours." And so we did. We had a meeting with Jeremy and Jesse, and then they basically talked about the whole process of, going into official potentially, and what the next months would entail and require from us.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really, I don't know even the proper way to
It was almost like jaw-dropping, because we just really were there to hang out and just meet everybody and say hi.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it was like, whole world got to
I remember people asking, like, why are these guys here? I'm like, I don't even know.
Cedric told us to come. Like, he said we were really cool. No, and so we basically just like went back to this restaurant. We sat down and we're like, what's happening?
Yeah.
Like, this was not what we expected.
Yeah, and it seems like, at least from my perspective, it happened pretty fast, as far as from the initial conversations to finally realizing, hey, this is going to be the next thing. It seemed like it happened pretty fast.
Yeah, well, even the map, like, we were only 15, 20%.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
That's
roughly.
true.
Like,
That's true. Yeah.
And so we weren't expecting that at all. And so we had to set up these, like, between ourselves, like, these kind of deadlines and goals, and then came back to them, and then everything. We basically just sacrificed the rest, like, next year of our lives to the map.
It's a good point, and we'll touch on that in a second. Josh, what was your experience like?
I don't even remember who contacted who first. Was it me?
I can tell you from the behind the scenes, I was like, hey, I know this guy named Josh. He's a little weird, but he's cool. Like, he can do this job. He's really good for it. People love him. He's charismatic in his own way.
I just remember, like, constantly bothering you guys, asking about what my resume was, what was going on with that for like a year.
Yeah, honestly, no. I'll be honest. Jat was a big advocate, and I was as well. But Jat was more so saying, "Hey, this guy Josh in the community, he's already helping out, because you were already doing a lot of stuff in the modding community at that point.
At that point,
you
I
were
was helping
essentially
people learn and things
doing 50% of the job, if not more. So it was just kind of not 50%, but So I remember Jad saying, "Hey, we have this guy named Josh." I obviously knew who you were at that time. Jad and I talked, and we're like, "Hey, we need to get this guy," and it's pretty much, at least from the other side, that's how that worked.
It was a little bit of a different experience, because at that point, we talked about it a bit, like the potential of this position of moving into the mod community liaison, as Cedric was moving into more of a designer role, and it just kind of dragged on for a little while. So I was like, "Nah, this ain't gonna happen." And then one day they're just like, "Okay, time for the interview," and I'm like, "Wait, what?" So it was an interesting transition, because for a while I wasn't sure it was actually going to happen. And then it just kind of dropped on my head, and I'm like, okay, I'm doing this now. This is actually happening. So it was rough. But I'd had previous experience in the industry, but on the console side of it, like actually working for Microsoft projects and things like that. I was on certification for the Xbox One, and then testing for the actual operating system. But I'd never worked for a studio before, and that was a big transition.
True.
That is a huge difference when you're working for like the platform holders, and when you're working for the content creation of what studios do and everything. It's a major difference in the way things operate. So it was a bit of a culture shock there as well.
For sure. And I think the important thing that I want people to latch on to this is that all of these people were technically poached, Like, it wasn't some, let's put out some random job posting and see who applies. Oh, they're from the community, cool, we'll take them. No, it's we have our eyes on people. We're very close to what the community is doing. We're very close to what the community is creating. I don't want anyone to think that their work is going unnoticed, because we don't comment on everything, and we don't necessarily promote everything. But I'm still an enthusiast of modding. He's still I think we all are still an enthusiast of modding. So it's not like that culture has left us, or that lifestyle or that scene has left us. I think you're a modder at heart once you're a modder. Technically a lot of the stuff we're doing, I still look at modding when I'm doing my job. So I still think of it as modding, I should say. So it's not something, if you are in the community or you are putting out content for the game, don't feel like your efforts are going unnoticed. It's something that we look at, and it's something that, I respect and I appreciate, because all of us come from that same area. So it's something that, we all have very close to our hearts. But let's talk about that. So, the bright side, we all got hired, hooray. We all have jobs now. I think all of us had jobs prior to this as well, too. Probably. Yeah,
not a very good one.
Yeah, not a very good one. And then I quit mine as soon as we basically got the word that we were going to be. Yeah.
Because it wasn't even really a guarantee for. Well,
no,
they
it wasn't.
hinted at it, but it wasn't like after this you're going to get hired. We were like, well, let's just go on.
Yeah, go for it. And that's super, like. There's a lot we can dive into with that, but that's such a great story. There were I'm sure there was a lot of uncertainty, with making that move, but it paid out, or it paid off for us. But so we all got hired. We're here. We had jobs before, but this is arguably a better fit position for where we want to go, or what we want to do, or next step in our lives. So for people that actually went official, so myself and Ragnarok here, so what was that process like? I want to touch on this because it's a touchy subject as someone who creates what a lot of people would consider art. It is in its own way art, and having to compromise that art potentially. It's like telling oh, the Mona Lisa needs another stripe on the left side.
I thought you were gonna say another nose.
Yeah, no, add another nose. It's like telling someone that their vision is incorrect. How can you tell someone that their vision is incorrect? So I want to touch on that process a little bit and talk about, if there was anything that you had to change that maybe you didn't want to. For me, to be honest, there wasn't a lot that I had to change. I talked to Jeremy, and he was like, listen, dude, you got a handle on this, just put out content. That was pretty much so as far as compromising things that I wanted to do with the mod, maybe content or things that, I wanted to add at a later date, I didn't really have any restrictions for my part. It was more of just make sure you can hit this date, make sure it has these things, make sure that it's all been QA tested, make sure that it's good. Whatever you're going to put in there, make sure it's good by this date. That was sort of what my transition process to console was like in terms of content and figuring out if I needed to cut anything or potentially I needed to do more. So for Ragnarok, talk about that a little bit. Was there anything that, that potentially changed that you weren't planning on changing or?
I mean, both of us, we had just core level content that we had to cut, just from both the time and then also just functionality. Literally, just cannot have that much stuff in a level. I think there's multiple elements of that we both remember. I think what might be most dear to us that we had to cut that was disappointing was the story notes that we made. Yeah, because we actually had friends of ours. We wrote the story. We had them do trace overs and arts of where the locations were. It was actually really well done. But it ended up just. To be fair, the goal was to put them in. But then I think stuff just happened around here. We were super busy, and then it just wasn't. There's just no time to do that. Right. So unfortunately, it had to get cut out. But. The silver lining was they were like, yeah, it's really cool, let's go ahead and do it. Actually, you know what, I can't. And there's a lesson there in that some things, even if everybody wants to do them, sometimes it just doesn't work out. And I think that's actually really important to realize and get used to going into an environment like this where everyone's super talented and creative, but everyone's going to have their elements of it is disappointment. It sounds like a really negative word.
No, I don't think it's a negative word at all. I mean,
to where everyone wants to do something, it's what, we really just can't. It's not going to work out.
Yeah, I remember when you guys wanted to take the obelisk out of the sky.
That's
and they were
another one.
Nah.
That's what I was going to touch on. I was going to say,
you doing what?
We had our sunken obelisk, and everyone was all like, "Wait, where'd it go?" And I'm like, "It's back in the sky."
So a design change that they had to make because the powers that be wanted to see it a different way, and it's something that's important to realize about this process. I don't want to undermine that at all, in the sense that there is some compromise. There are technical limitations that. A lot of logistic problems that, make it challenging to produce mod content on consoles. And another thing that I wanted to point out, so how long was this process, would you say, of getting this ready for this console release? I mean,
console was rough.
Console was pretty rough.
That's hits on what you're talking about. Is we had to do so much stuff. Actually, that's probably the most underappreciated part of what we did.
Yeah,
and a lot of it goes unsaid.
Yeah, because when it's done right, you don't know anything's different. But now it runs on console, which has half or a quarter of the available space of people. And PC is basically infinite. How much RAM do you have?
Yeah.
Where console, you're I only have 8 gigs, a tiny bit.
Yeah.
It was the console part itself probably took us about a month.
Yeah, and not easy, wake up couple hours here and there. It was wake up and you go
right,
and then you go to sleep, you wake up and go.
So it's important to keep that in mind. Any mod that we bring to console, it's definitely a partnership. Any mod that goes official is a partnership with the studio. Any mod that we have brought over, every modder is now in some way, shape, or form have been involved in some partnership with the studio. center, Ragnarok. He, Ben, like Ben works here, David Jackson work here, I work here. So these are relationships we're developing. We aren't just paying modders to give us maps, and we aren't just paying modders to give us content. We're developing relationships. These have obviously panned out to be good relationships for us. Even if it didn't necessarily pan out to be a good relationship with this particular company, it's still a good relationship to have, to build that exposure, to build that understanding of the inner workings of game studios. So, I don't want people to think that, oh man, Wildcard's just paying people to do their game. Like, no. We're paying people to do what they love, and we're also building relationships with people that create good content, because potentially that relationship could develop into something more permanent like this. Which kind of brings me to my last question. After our full experiences here, and with what we came from and where we're at now, I'll do it as an either-or question. Is there any advice you would give to people that are potentially looking to follow the same route, or is there anything that you would do differently, knowing everything that you've went through now? And I probably need a second to think about my answer, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to somebody else.
I mean, the obvious answer is always work hard, but for me, the real kind of quality that someone can show for improvement is being able to accept criticism about something that you're so passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you make something and you're like, and it's happened to everybody here.
Mm-hmm.
You're super psyched with it, and it's like, this is perfect, and then someone comes along and points out either a flaw that's obvious that you just missed, or something that you just didn't think about.
Yep.
And the ability to take that and then revamp what you've done to address those concerns is huge.
Yeah.
And that's something I see a lot, and it makes me a little sad sometimes to people almost afraid to give criticism, as long as it's constructive.
Right.
This map sucks. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like Cedric's criticism. But that's a quality for me that I think people need to focus more on, because that just leads to everything.
Very good point.
So.
Very good point.
Real quick, before you answer that, just stop looking at this camera. This one's full. So when you guys look, just look at that camera.
I just look at the ceiling, dude.
You're good.
Or
Yeah,
just
sure.
look into space.
Yeah. Let me clap you again for that one.
Jackson, what about you, man?
I have to, so to hit on what Dave said, I definitely 100% agree that you have to be able to take criticism, open to feedback. Sometimes some of the best ideas that we got were not from ourselves, but from our community and people that love the map as much as we did. Also, something I always tell people, don't be afraid to fail. Like, if you don't like something that you're doing or you're unhappy with it, don't just begrudgingly accept it. Like, undo it, go back, start over, do it again, because it's so important. And I think that's when I learned the most, is when I went back and redid stuff and didn't just accept that what it was is I had to have it. I would say, too, I guess, really it's just about, even on those days, those struggle days, like we were talking about earlier, about when you're in the editor and like you're stuck at a wall, like just keep poking at it every day. Even if you don't want to, there were some days where I'd get in the editor and I'd be like, man, I don't want to make this area. But then I'd spend like 10 minutes and like all of a sudden I was like, okay, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yep.
Sometimes it's all it takes. Just get back in there. It's what I tell people, is just jump in every day. Keep doing it.
Zane, you got anything you want to share with the people?
I would say if you're starting or getting into mods, now's really one of the best times, just because our whole work process within Wildcard has changed to more support mods as a whole. Programming, we've worked a lot more in Blueprint so that modders can see what we've done, use what we've done to work from their own and learn from what we've done. I remember when I started, the most you could get from blueprinting was like the spike wall. I think was one of the few things that actually had blueprint on it.
And the beaver.
Yeah.
And the what?
And the beaver.
That's true, the beaver.
Beaver wasn't out.
Oh, yeah.
I was
that's
at
true.
like Trikes, Raptors, and Rexes and Pterosaurs.
Yeah.
It's
All of our
stupid.
dinos they ate and they fought and ran away. That's about all they did. So starting now, just look at everything that you have that's there. Use the dev kit to its fullest. All that stuff is a resource for you to learn, to build off of. As an example, use it all. It really is very, very helpful.
Josh.
Live life. No, serious.
Oh my god.
Cut.
I'm serious, all right? Because here's the thing. When you make mods, you're trying to craft an experience, something that changes the way the game can be experienced. But you can't craft an experience if you haven't had any for yourself. Whether it's a visual one or a functional experience, the way things work, you need to understand how they work in the real world yourself so you can dissect those, you can take them apart, you can look at how like the grain of wood looks, and you can emulate that in a digital environment. So you have to actually go out and experience these things in some fashion, viewing them, watching how people do them, going skydiving, going snowboarding, seeing how these aspects of life work is how you learn how to build them. So go out, live life, gain experiences, and then share them with other people.
Wow, that was profound.
That was
almost.
profound.
I am like,
I live in my office.
yeah.
Google Images, you know.
What level of life are you, Dave? Like level 2 or level 3?
Like maybe some things on the walls.
I only know how to get home and to the office.
All right, so you're like level 2 life. All right, I'm trying to get at the level 3.
I'm getting there. I'm planning to go skydiving on my vacation.
Now that would be cool.
Yep.
For me, you know, if you're doing this for fun, have fun. You know, don't make this more serious than you need it to be. If you're just doing this to have fun and learn a few things, don't put unneeded pressure on yourself. Yep. You know, if you are one of the ones that want to compete and want to be on a more competitive level, or you're trying to get in the industry, my advice for you would be have passion about what you're doing or don't do it. It's pretty simple. You know, all the people that have made it to this level clearly have passion for what they're doing. You can see it. The second someone does not have passion for something, you will immediately be able to tell, and it's not something that's going to make it to this level, in my opinion. So I would say, you know, be passionate about what you're doing. Find something that you are passionate about. Like, I know if you like modding, that's cool. Find a project that you're passionate about. Find a feature that you're passionate about. Find a dinosaur that you're passionate about. You know, whatever that minute thing it is, find your passion and make a mod for that. Because that is going to be the best content that you can make. You can be super talented and you know everything in the book, but if you're not passionate about something you're working on, it will show in your work, and it'll show in the quality of your work, and the energy will show as well. So that would be my advice if you are trying to be competitive or trying to get in the industry. But if you're just trying to have fun, don't take it that serious, you know?
Yep. Swearing Trudons.
Yeah. With that said, I think that was the last question. It was a healthy discussion. Hopefully, if you guys like this, we'll do more. You know, I think this was just like a test to see how this type of content goes over, but I think there's opportunity to do more discussions like this, not necessarily with just modding. Maybe it's the design of a creature. Maybe it's a particular update that we did. I don't know. Like maybe there's something that we can also do this and have just a very organic discussion with you guys. But hopefully you enjoy it, and hopefully there's more to come. That's all I got. Peace.